Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephen Henry Madoff, the founding chair of the MA Curatorial Practice program at the School of Visual Arts in New York. And I'm very pleased to welcome Fatima SY today, coming to us from Dakar, Senegal. And I'm just going to read a brief biographical sketch of Fatima, and then I will turn things over to her. So Fatima is the curator of programs at Raw Material Company in Dakar. And at Raw, she's curated several shows or co-curated them. Le Spectre des Ancêtres en Devenir by Tuan Andrew Nguyen in 2022. L'École des Mutants by Hamedine, Kane, and Stéphane Verlet-Bottéro in 2021. D'une rive à l'autre by Ibrahima Thiam in 2020, and co-directed the following discursive programs: Convocations, Sex Ecologies at Kunsthall Trondheim with the Seed Box in 2021, and Bivouac #2, Breathing Out of School, Raw Academy at Bétonsalon in 2020. Her writing has been published in books and journals, including O Africa Art, 52 Contemporary African Artists in 2021, Something We Africans Got, #10, and Swag, High Profiles 2 and 3. She's worked for years in the field of cultural mediation at institutions such as the Musée du Louvre, the Musée Rodin, the Grand Palais, and the Fondation Louis Vuitton. Her research focuses on the cultural policies of Senegal from the 60s to today, along with the market dynamics that act on the contemporary art scene of the African continent and its diaspora. She's a graduate of the master's program in exhibition sciences and techniques at Université Paris #1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, and she lives and works in Dakar. And so at this point, I will turn things over to Fatima. Fatima, welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, to be here and to share this moment with us. So thank you for this very, very extended presentation of myself. So I'm curator of program here at Raw Material Company. And I'm really happy, and us at Raw, we are really happy to have the opportunity to share our practice, but we are in series now with the student of the MA in Curatorial Practice and yourself. So I'm going to start with a brief presentation of RAW, the work we are doing there, and also what are, in a certain way, the foundation of this institution. So when it comes to, how do you say, Raw Material Company, and we talk about it, we have to settle in a certain way, or to give the base of what is Dakar at this moment when Koyo decided to open this art center. So we call ourselves Center for Art, Knowledge and Society. And Koyo landed in Dakar in the mid-90s, and she comes here as an independent curator, but also working with the United States Embassy. And she practiced there and she developed there her practice as an independent curator with the whole community of artists, practitioners that was based in Dakar. So in the late 60s, when the President Léopold Sédar Senghor, which is our first president here in Senegal, when he take the lead after the independence, he developed the whole cultural policy attached to what we call le mouvement de la négritude. You have to know that Senghor is one of the founding members of this movement. It was a literature movement, and gathering many reflection, teamworks of intellectuals, writers, thinkers of the African continent and its diaspora. And along with Aimé Césaire, they created this movement in Paris during their studies. And somehow, I think that Léopold Sédar Senghor find the space to develop a whole aesthetic around this very movement of la négritude in Dakar when he came and he started developing a very organized and structured cultural policy. The base of that are in the Congress of the African Writers and Artists that were, there was a first gathering in Paris in 1959, and there was a second one in Roma. Oh, the first gathering in Paris in 1956 and the second one in Roma in 1959. And you have for one of the first time thinkers that come from the continent, French, English-speaking Africa, French-speaking Africa, East Africa, but also African Americans, Caribbeans, and people that live abroad, the people from the diaspora of the continent, and they gather to share what they are going through in their different geographies, at which stage they are regarding the independent movement, but also regarding segregation, etc., etc. So there was many conversations going on. And it was also a way for them to know each other, because at some point we have to say that there was not really many connection or a very wide space where they can meet all together and exchange. And one of the structures that created the basis for that was Présence Africaine, a publishing house which is in Paris, still existing and producing and publishing a review called Présence Africaine first, and then a selection of publication of writers of African descent. And when they organized the Congress of the African Writers and artists, they decided when Senghor, somehow between 1959 and 1966, they decided, Senghor and Alioune Diop, who was the founders of this publishing house, to develop a festival of wider importance in Senegal that will inform different practice, literature, of course, but visual art, cinema, dance, our tradition and folklore, every single thing that made us being a community. And in order for us to know each other, know each contributors' culture. So people come from many countries in the world. There were, of course, a kind of link which was tied to the way the French academical system used to do things, because Senghor was rooted into that system. So this is how he developed the cultural policy of the country, by creating infrastructure first, but also by organizing gatherings and moments of sharing that will give us the opportunity to be all together in Senegal. So more infrastructure he created. There was a National School of Art, there was a National School of Architecture, Musée Dynamique, which was a museum where many artists from different areas of the world came to share their practice, but where also the artists from the National School of Art, called l'École de Dakar, that gave us lately to a movement, were sharing their work and doing exhibitions. But among all the projects, there was also the project of the Museum of Black Civilization that happened during the Senghor era, and the project of the Biennale. So the Dakar Biennale is one of the second, in a certain way, one of the projects of the President Léopold Sédar Senghor, implemented by the President Abdou Diouf, who come just after him, after Senghor resigned. And it was an event where the idea was to gather the practice of, in the same idea than the Festman, and in a certain way linked to the way Senghor think of its infrastructure. It was a place where can meet the practice of the people from descent, but most of them tied to the continent or being rooted in the continent. After 1996, things has changed and evolved so that the Biennale can embrace the practice of artists, of course, from African descent, but still being in different other geography, less nationalized in a certain way. And the Dakar Biennale, when it started in 1991, became somehow the moment where people used to come to Dakar and what is of contemporary African art. So from the creation of the creation of the Mouvement La Négritude to the creation of the different infrastructure of art in Dakar, to the very creation of the Festman and the Biennale de Dakar, there was many things that were happening in Dakar and giving to people Dakar as a cursor for what was happening in the field of contemporary African art, and it never stopped. The last Biennale took place last year, and it was the 14th edition, and we're going to talk about this Biennale and the project we ran during that Biennale. So Koyo, when she comes to Dakar, she's in the middle of that. The Biennale has already 2 editions that happen. You have international curators, but also local curators that come, art historian, and there is also a whole infrastructure of researcher, a whole number of researchers coming from different geographical area that come to Dakar in order to make research on practice from artist collective, but also for some group of resistant in a certain way. Let me explain myself. There was 2 to 3 main collective in Dakar that open or that start collaborating. They start before that, but they structure themselves somehow within the Laboratoire Agitart, for instance, in 1974. The Laboratoire Agitart was a kind of a collective of artists that share the filmmaking practice, the visual art practice, also theater, a lot of play on art, they call it, and also paintings and all the visual art component of the society. It was created by Issa Samb, that we call Joe Wakam, and in a certain way, Joe Wakam is a kind of spiritual father for us here at RO, and their practice were rooted into rethinking the artistic practice and put it in the middle of the society so that everyone can access it, but also make full the boundaries of this very artistic practice. Instead of having people going to the museum in order to visit exhibition, needing to have a lot of different keys in order to understand the artistic practice, or instead of making it in a certain way very elitist, they transform the relationship people of our communities and countries have with the artistic practice. They were rooted between the city center of Dakar and La Médina, and they were developing there all their different kind of work. And among them, you have Djibril Diop Mambéty, who was a filmmaker. You have also Elachi, who is a painter. He's still alive, and he did an exhibition at the last Biennale. It was a very long time since his work is more visible in Europe now, and the fact that he showed again his work in Dakar in an exhibition set up during the Biennale, it was for many of us the first contact with LHC work, knowing that he's been working since perhaps the early 60s. And you have also, among those artists, you have a dramaturg called Yusuf Ajan that passed away, and Issa Samb, the visual artist. But Issa Samb, we have to say that he's more than visual artist. He's working at different intersections, and he was mostly a thinker and a wide person. I don't know how to say that properly in English, but Issa gathered in itself, and with the people he used to work and with the people he used to navigate the life, I have to say, very, very generous, and being able to address every single conversation topic, being a very interested, he was interested in so many fields, so many subjects, that he can talk about almost everything. And when Koyo developed when she came to Dakar and developed her curatorial practice, she was in the middle of this crowd of people trying to develop an artistic practice that was not rooted into the canon of the Negritude movement or into the canon of the political, cultural of the President Léopold Sédar Senghor, and that were in opposition to this system that was too academical and really disconnected from what was happening within our geography. So we the way Issa developed, Issa Sam Joachim developed the Laboratoire Agitart was also informing the artistic practice of many, many local actors, be it people from the National School of Dakar, be it people from its own neighborhood, or that have, in a certain way, an artistic practice that was not qualified as such by the very instance of art here in Senegal. He will bring everyone to the stage in order to be able also to rethink the way we address the artistic practice or the research or the way we developed our project. And in that idea, there was in Dakar the creation of an art festival called Parcours, where Ro is one of the founding member of Parcours, and the Parcours was think really like Issa was thinking his practice, and he was thinking his way to navigate the city, informing the different geography, being able to address the work of each of the component of the society, being a space for harvester to talk, for politicians to talk, for philosophers to talk, but also being a space where we can discuss almost everything and add it to what we call the artistic practice. So Parcours is a festival that just ended up last month, but it's an important part of the programmation that happened in Dakar, and it is also the structure that is working with the government when the Dakar Biennale take place, and they develop the off program of the Dakar Biennale. So, you know, when we talk about Koyo coming to Dakar and about the work she has been doing here, it is important to set up the base of what is Ro in a certain way and how Ro come up. And knowing that Dakar was a place where many, many things were happening in the art field, she decided, instead of going back to Cameroon, where Princess Marilyn Douala Mangabel was doing an amazing work regarding art in public space and create there an infrastructure called Douala Art, she decided to come to Dakar. And then she started working with the people. And at some point, she was facing issues when she used to receive guests and people from abroad, but also people from abroad. I don't mean out of the continent, but mostly people that are people from Mali, people from Nigeria or other places like that. The idea was, okay, but there is many things that happen in Dakar. There is many exhibitions that took place. There is a lot of paintings, there is collecting art, you have tank, you have refacet, but okay, all these are here, but what are you producing in terms of knowledge and writings, and how are you documenting this history? And this is why Ro was created. At some point, there was a lack of space of critical thinking in Dakar, and there was also a need to have a space where you can gather all the resources we have in terms of publication, voices, songs, film, all the things that document our communities and also that document the African art history at some point. And if you remember also in the mid-90s, there was a lot of exhibition that happened before that, in the late 80s, and then after, you have exhibition that happened in France, for instance, in the UK, in the United States. You have 7 stories about modern art in Africa. In the UK, you have also this exhibition called Magicien de la Terre in France, and many other exhibitions that's supposed to inform the artistic practice on the continent, but not being in a certain way dragged by the very people who live in the continent and who work there, and also not informing the practice of art historians that were locally based, curators that were locally based. And there was a kind of disconnection between what was happening abroad in terms of exhibition and writings on contemporary African art and what people truly lived within our geographies. So at some point, Ro was made also for that, created a space where the people who are interested in the art field, the people who really want to engage with the artistic practice, but also writing and thinking about it, they can find a space, a kind of shelter where they can come, they can have books, access to books, so a library. They can have access to resources through the computer. Like we have many people living in Dakar that were here during the Senghor era, but that were here also during the Abdoulaye Wade era, and that have resources in terms of recordings of, for instance, the Association of French Senegalese Students in Paris, recorded of migrants that used to go from Senegal to other geographies and use a little cassette in order to give to their family info on how they are living, etc., etc. And they will record, for instance, or in Berlin, and then they will send it by mail to their family, and the family record itself, and they send it again. And so you have many resources like that people just give us, because they say, okay, you have the library, you are doing a work in order to document, archive, and inform also our history. Perhaps you will have people that will need these resources. It could be also magazines, review, or many different kind of document that people will just share. And the library is an amazing resource and an amazing base for us to start, because it is a place where everything is happening. As curators or researchers, or no matter what we are and how we qualify ourselves, we always go to that library in order to start something or to develop our research, our practice, or our thinking. And the fact that we have it, it is a gem, because in the studies we have made, some of us did studies abroad and then they come back. Some of us were at Dakar University, but you don't have all this amount of resources regarding or informing the work in the field of art, fashion, photography, dance, theater, cinema, architecture in one specific place. And the raw base is made for that. So in the raw base, we have many people coming from different kind of geographies just to do specific researches, but we have also the student of the National School of Art that still exists, students from business school that come in order to dig into research, to learn about Pan-Africanism, to read the work of the people from to read the work and the writings of thinkers that are like Cheikh Diop. It could be Frantz Fanon, but it could be also Ta-Nehisi Coates, it could be Felwinsa, so, or Chimamanda, I mean various authors. And the way we think about our programmation and the exhibition is really the library as a starting point. And then from the library, we develop our public program. And from the very beginning, Rose started in 2011, but in Koyo's mind, it started in 2008. I have to precise in Koyo's mind. And she was thinking about the whole project, and then it happened as a physical space. Our first premises were in SICAP. It's residential area, but that are tied to a specific period of Senegal where you have administrators and people working for the government that have kind of program, living, building program in order to have them a space to be with their families. And then those houses now in those neighborhoods, you have mostly families that are there since the 50s or the 60s. And it's a really, quiet area, but also popular, because you have Grand Dakar surrounding and different kind of other geographies. So the idea of the public program was to drag those communities into the space so that we can share about the Fridays Out Cross, so the Vox Artist, which is a moment where we share our practice, an artist practice, but it could be an architect also, it could be a writer, it could be a book that we talk about. We have the Parlons Sénégalaiserie, which is one of the programs we really like it, we prefer it, because it's about what is happening in the society and which kind of argument is there in the press, which kind of conversation happened between Boubacar Boris Diop and Souleymane Bachir Diagne, which kind of subject of society is just happening, and we just inform ourselves through broadcast, emission, podcast, but also TV, listening to the radio when you are in the cab or in the car, and then you have all this information about, okay, what is agitating the community and the people from Dakar, and then we put that in our conversation. And we have also what we call citéology. Citéology is really connected to architecture and how we live together, how we built our house, and is build our house connected to our very needs. At some point, there is an eager for modernity in our countries and in our geographies, and then you have just like areas that are just disappearing from one day to another because you have this immobilier program or this building program bring by a multinational or which kind of company, and they're going to build a huge building in the middle of houses, and then it causes different kind of problem of how we live in apartment. Do we want to live in apartment? Where is the place where we meet with our elders? Where is the place where we meet with our friends? You don't receive people in your room, you receive them in this shared space. Where is the space where people want to play? Where is the space for this and that, for this and that? So we are struggling a lot because the way our houses were built were just like, I don't know, superstructure like that around the circle. And then in the middle of the area, you have the house surrounding it. And in the middle, you have this open space where people can share everything. And everyone is coming from its room, from its house, whatever it is called, and they share. And the building don't give that to people. So we have to rethink the way we are building things. And citéology is a space where we debate that, where we think about that, and where we invite also a young generation of architects, and this new generation of architects that is digging into bioclimatic material of construction, rooted into how traditionally we use to build in order to fight the heat or to fight this big wind we have at some period of the year. So it is more about how we navigate the city also, and how we live in those cities. And the last program that I didn't mention was the Rose Cine Club. And Rose Cine Club is really take the pulse of the community and of the filmmaking. We have very famous filmmakers like Ousmane Sambet, etc. But we are really keen on knowing the work of, I don't know, Alain Gomis, Mati Job, yes, many other filmmakers that are working within our context or broadly, Maimouna Doucouré, for instance, and that we want to inform their practice. We want people to know their practice, and also to document what is happening in the diaspora, because most of the filmmaking scene is rooted into what is happening in our very context, specific scene of life regarding the Lebu community, regarding migration, for instance, etc., etc. If we take the film of Diana Gay, La Pirogue, but we have also many filmmakers that are in other geographies like the United States, the UK, France, where we have a diaspora, many people that come from the continent and that make film rooted into their. How do we bring that to the audience? How do we bring it to people in order for them to follow what is happening in that film? And then the public programming is taking place every Friday. Of course, COVID changed it for us, but the idea was really to have it every Friday happening and having people from Zone B, Grand Dakar, Point E, Dakar. Some of them come from Guédiawaye, it is in the suburbs. And then all those people meeting at Row, sharing conversation, discussion, debating, and at the end having a moment, a foodie moment, where we eat, we drink, and we open the scope also of this conversation, and we keep on asking questions, because it's not really a matter of having the answer. What really matters to us is that how we complexify also the conversation we have. And one of the other programs we have at RO is the condition report. And the condition report, called État des lieux in French, is this symposium that took place every 2 years. And the idea of the symposium was really for RO to have this specific moment where we invite people from different kinds of infrastructure and geographies to share their knowledge on very specific topics of matters. So the first symposium was about the creation of art institution on the continent. The second symposium was on artistic education. You can't see on artistic education in Africa, but you have also a book. This symposium gives birth to another program that I'm going to talk about very soon. Oh, I'm taking too much time. Okay, and then we have L'État des lieux on art history in Africa. This one gives birth to a publication that is really spread internally, so people are more informed about which kind of pedagogy and curriculum concerning the curatorial practice, but also the art history field were shared within our very context. And the last one we have was on art collective and translocal parallelism, and it takes place in Dakar during the Dakar Biennale. And the other program, which is a very important program that we have here at RO, is the RO Academy. And the RO Academy was developed by Koyo along with Eva Barois de Caivel, Marie-Hélène and Marie Cissé, that are key figures of the RO team because they were here since the very beginning. And the RO Academy program developed by Koyo with its team and also Rasha Salti, RO Academy. They created the RO Academy in 2016, and the discursive program where we can have one director being a very experienced person in the field of creation, in the field of how to say that, performance, in the political scene, etc., etc. So having a person that have at least an experience, it could be someone from the university and having an amazing academical background, but it is not the main thing that we're going to look at. It is needed that this person in its practice inform all the component of our cultures. I mean by that having degree in university is, of course, an important thing, but it doesn't mean that you can't put into your curriculum medical traditional belief, that you can't put in your curriculum or in what you know or what you are trying to learn, the work that has been doing by harvesters in our countries or in the field since years. It doesn't mean that you can open the scope of the knowledge, the religious knowledge or the cultural knowledge we have and that we irritated. So the idea is to open the conversation and to invest pedagogies or curricula that are not the one that will be at the university, and to tie it with what we have learned, because we have learned those things. So we can't act like it doesn't exist, but we have to know how to see ourselves into those very pedagogies, into those very university curricula, and how it can inform also practices that are not Western practices, and how these practices can count as well. So the academy, it is 2 sessions, it was 2 sessions a year, now it is 1 session a year. We have academies, it takes 7 weeks. We have one director that come, and we select with the director the 8 or 10 faculty that gonna come and share their work and their field of research with the students, which are the fellows. And those fellows are selected by application based on a project they have. They don't need to be rooted or connected to a academical canon once again, but it is needed for us to see that the work they are doing or the research they are developing, we can complexify it or find answers within the academy, the RO Academy space. So the last one took place in ICA in Philadelphia. It was looking at infrastructure. It was with Linda Goode-Bryan, and it was an amazing moment also because it was the first time the academy just travel and is rooted in another geography, but it was needed as the very space we were looking at was the infrastructure of the artistic ecosystem through the Western gaze. So how we can find dynamics in the art market that can inform also all the different components of our cultures, but also societies. So here are a few images of the academy. This one was the academy with Otoban Kanga called Germination. And you have here Naomi, whom is an artist and who lives now in Senegal and is developing her artistic practice, and also Aminat and Sandrine Oliasso. And this image is really interesting because they meet together during the Academy of Otoban, Germination. Some of them did also the Academy of Koyo Kura, like Sandrine and Aminat, and then they find ways to work together and they develop different kind of exhibition project, but also how they say reading rooms and performances and event, but all together. And the Academy gives that also to the young practitioners. It is having a network when you are from our geographies, or when you are from even if you are from Europe, but you are how they say, this migration body of people, it is sometimes difficult to find the connection you need to emerge into that art field. And sometimes it is even more difficult to find the resources you need, or the PhD teacher that's gonna accompany you through your research within in the field you want and in the curriculum or the corpus you are interested in, because sometimes they are not equipped. So the idea is also for that academy to give a stage or a space for those young curators, artists, workers, thinkers, makers, creatives to emerge and to find the network they need in order to go further in their research. This one was a Raw Academy called Cura. And yes, in the work we are doing, we have also all the publications. And for the publication, you have the very first one called Une Bibliothèque Idéale that set the base of the raw base. And then you have the publication from the assemblies, the exhibition publication, or the one of, for instance, one of the exhibition was Chronique d'une Révolte. And the idea, the Chronique d'une Révolte was made based on something that happened in 2012 when the President Abdoulaye Wade decided to change the constitution, and there was a whole uprising and revolt in the country. And then Raw accompanies this moment of the society also. They document all the work of the photographers that were in the riots and the manifestation, and then we put word into within the images we have gathered. And so that happened in the street. It get into the institution, and we open the scope of this conversation by making public program. And the publication is what is remaining from what happened at this moment, but it also driven the career of photographers or artistic workers through years now. And those are the last publication we have made within the exhibition project and the publication of the Raw Academy, which is a composition of the 5 first academy, and the directors, the fellows, and the faculty, but also the observers are sharing the lecture they have of this academy, what we should change, what doesn't work, what happened in this specific academy that shocked them, or what was great, etc. So there is normally a second book to be published. And then we come to our exhibition. I'm sorry, Stephen, I was really long, but I'm going to do it like the way I should. So the exhibition we have here at Raw, at the very beginning, Koyo, Marie-Hélène, and Marie-Cissé, and I have to precise that because it was only the 3 of them. Marie-Hélène was working in administration, but also curatorial practices, en tout cas, engaging with the curatorial practice. Marie-Cissé was producer and in charge of all the publication with Koyo and the Raw base, and hosting also the programming. And they used to have 4 to 5 exhibitions a year. It was a lot. And at some point, Raw took a sabbatical in 2014. And between 2014 and 2016, there was a whole moment of restructuration and rethinking the institution and what they were doing. did they program or develop exhibition and projects just to have people coming to the opening, drinking champagne or bisap and being just like, la, 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 this is super cool? Or are we thinking about how we can be within the society and deeply, like how do we develop the curatorial practice that is anchored into the very context where we are navigating and we are developing our practice, and how we are able to respond or to find ways to get in very, very close conversation with our communities. And this is how we started thinking our practice, like, okay, we developed works and projects with the residency program, with the row base, with the reading rooms, with the Fridays at Row. There is a symposium, there is a publication. So how come this kind of various program we have can inform the curatorial practice, and how can we decide also that sometimes the best way to navigate a specific conversation is the space of a book, because the context don't give space because of censorship, don't give space for this program to happen publicly. How can we use a book? How can we use a public program? How can we use an exhibition, and how sometimes the best answer is a podcast, how sometimes the answer could be a symposium that take place online, etc., etc., etc. So we started having more space, giving for ourselves more space to dig into conversation or having conversation with our community and our audience. And this is how the academy also emerged. And this is the reason why they think also about the academy, how we can equip the practitioners and the creators and the artists so that they have the word they need or the reference they need or the mediums they need to express themselves within the artistic community. And this space you are looking at is our second venue, which is the residency. And the work we have been doing these past 2 years is really tied to this residency program. So during COVID, there was, the residency is inviting or receiving 2 times a year international artists, researchers, curators, architects. It could be which different field and different medium of art. And they will come to Row for at least 4 weeks, and it is based on an application, and we do a selection, and we have to be sure that the work the artist is engaging with can be informed within our context and can be also accompanied by Row. So we decided during COVID, because there was many issues in terms of traveling, that we're gonna create a residency which would be rooted locally, because most of our residents were coming from. Then we decided to create a residency program for our local artists. And the idea come because there is artists here that are really interesting and brilliant, and they are in the beginning of their career or mid-career. But in Dakar, you don't have many space of residency, but at least you need to have also a space of residency that's gonna accompany you way after the exhibition process. So the idea for us with Ibrahima Thiam, who was the first artist that we host within the local residency program, it is a production residency program where we receive the artist for 2 months, and then we develop an exhibition, we deepen its research, we do the different kind of connection and networking needed, we do the research with the people from university, but also people which are in the field or in the rural areas, and we bring all the knowledge we've gathered and we think together about an exhibition. And Ibrahima Thiam's practices is really informed by what is happening in the Lebu community. The Lebu community or collectivity, people say it's an ethnical group, but it's a collectivity. And it is a collectivity because it's an aggregation and a composition of many people coming from different geographical areas that were taken or that joined the group during the exode of the Lebu community from the Damel du Cayor. And it is an area in Senegal. The Damel was a kind of king, and he was really oppressive. And then the Lebu were the one who say, okay, we're gonna leave this. We won't stay there. And we want just to find shelter or a space where we can find ourselves. This space, they come from all the north of Senegal to the Yes, South Dakar in the middle of is in the middle of all this, and then they come and they decided to settle in Dakar, which is the presqu'île du Cap Vert, and Dakar is the nose of Senegal some way when you look at the map, and they decided to settle there, and those communities have very, very deep and knowledge, but also connection with the non-beings or the unseen people. And we really, how do you say, believe in those things here. And it is important for us that this part of who we are is also informed. So Ibrahima Thiam started at a very young age. He used to listen to his mom, his grandma, who will tell stories about like the different deities and goddesses that are along the coast in Senegal. And Ibrahima will gather all this information. And at a certain age, he find out that there is a whole generation of young people that were not educated through the tales. And educated through the tales is very chosen words, because the tales are used to educate you to know that in the geography where you are living, you are not alone. And in the area where we are, that when we walk in the street, we share the street with someone that we don't see. That when we are by night in the city center in Dakar, by the sea, there is things that happen along the coast that you can't understand. But it is okay to not understand what is happening within the Lebu communities, the sacrifice they are doing, or the offrande they're going to go to the sea, because it is what they believe in, and it is important to respect that. And how you can be an individual in a city, but still being concerned about how you share this very city with people or beings or non-beings, and how you have to respect the space of those non-beings. And during the COVID, it was more seen, because you have different kind of species that we don't even know we have in Senegal, that start being into the streets, that get out of the field, and that just occupies the street, occupies the space. And then Ibrahima was really interesting into how we can share with the youth, with the people living in Dakar, what is the story of the country through the eyes of those deities and goddesses. So he started from Saint-Louis with Mam Kumbabang. This is a picture you see. It is the Senegal River, and there people are doing offrande to this goddess of water. Most of them are, of course, a goddess and deities of water. They are all women. There is only one man, and this very one man is informed by what you see in this picture, which is a big tree, a baobab tree, where people in the families used to do or to put their hotel. I don't know if it's a correct word in English. A kind of hotel of offrande or sacrifice, where you're gonna go and give poor milk, pour cola, and put different kind of fruits, so that the spirits can feel that they are honored and still keep on protecting the family. And this is very specific, because in the city center of Dakar, and in Dakar, there is what we call pinch, and the pinch are the representation, the totem of the different family of the Lebu collectivity. And usually it is a very important tree in the middle of a house, or at the in the street, and then we have to preserve it, because we really think that the spirit live in those trees. And this is a ham that, of course, Ibrahima theatralized, or he did the scenography of what a ham might look like. But the idea was really for him to put again in our imaginaries these stories that we all learned when we were kids, and at some point we just forget that, okay, ecology and environment, it's not only about what you see in the TV, it's that you can practice in a daily basis. And there is islands where you can't go because you have the spirit living there, and as you can't respect your area of living, you should go there, because you won't maintain the way you should. Or okay, we can open this place to tourism, this geographic area, but we won't extract oil from Sangomar because Sangomar is the place where the spirits are living, and we won't touch it because this is what makes us being what we are. And we truly believe in that. And so these are the pictures that Ibrahima take, the photographies that he take during his residency. And he was developing a whole series around another figure called Mam Ndere, whom is the deity of the goddess of a geographical area called Yoff. So if you look at the coat or the carte of Senegal, and each of those places have a deities, it's just like they are just along the coast protecting the land. So in the water, but protecting us. So Mamdiri is Yoff, Mamkumba Bank Saint-Louis, Mamidi is Fatigue, and they are there all along the water. And the only I don't have an image of Mamdek Ndawo, but I mean, it's anecdotic. Mamdek Ndawo is the male-female figure. People don't like to say he's male-female, but in different kind of conversation, he can be male or female. And what was really interesting with the work we've been doing with Ibrahima is the guy that you see yourself to go and to look and to do the research and to be informed in a proper way in order to really be with him within its research. It gives us a wide scope of new people that we are working with. We did, we developed a kind of bande sonore for the exhibition. We work in Wolof, a lot of wording in Wolof. Most of the wording here are in French or English. And at that time, we have to be into our local language or into this main language. So we decided to work in this language too. And it just educated us. It was challenging because we are not that connected to the labor community. And I have to say that Carol Diop, who is the architect we work for Ecologies, and who is really rooted into this history, of an intensive help for this project. And then we have many people that are not used to come to Row that won't come because it's not in their area, because they don't know about it, that join us for the opening and for the exhibition, and that work with us for that. And then it opened a whole conversation with, even like recently we have an international artist called Nora Chipomire that come to Dakar, and we've been through the whole research of Ibrahima in order to be able to inform correctly her research. And it is also interesting because most of Row programs are connected, like interconnected, yes, somehow. And then the second residency, local residency we host was L'École des Mutants. And it was a very interesting project because it is tied with Senghor history, but it is also tied with what happened within the different government that Senegal have faced, starting from Senghor through Abdou Diouf, going to Abdoulaye Wade, and more recently for Macky Sall. And one of the components of the exhibition of Stéphane and Hamedine, it is, so Stéphane and Hamedine, Hamedine is a Senegalese artist, Stéphane is a French, Greek, UK, he's Métis. Yes, he's Métis somehow. He's from different region of Europe. And Hamedine, the other component of the binôme, is a Senegalese guy that go through the migration process. So within the whole thing, you see how people do migration now. It's not just taking a plane and going, it's more going through the whole process. And Hamedine did that process. He was without paper for a very long time. And he started his artistic and curatorial practice, I have to say, and this idea of collective with Stéphane, because they were looking at, on one of their trips in Dakar, the pedagogies that were developed during the post-independence, and those pedagogies and curriculum that were developed by researchers that think about how we can be together within one language, how we can be together within the research, corpus research we are developing, how we can be together within the dance language, the body language, how we can be together within the architecture. And then they started digging into one of the projects of President Léopold Sédar Senghor called l'Université des Mutants. It was an utopic project, but it worked for 2-3 years. And l'Université des Mutants was in Gorée. And the idea of l'Université des Mutants was after l'École William-Ponty. Okay, no. Okay, I have to start again. I'm sorry. So the William-Ponty School was a school where during the colonial period and post-colonial period, the elite and the people who supposed to run our country that were colonized, they were coming from, though they were coming from which was in Sébikotane. It's in the rural area of Senegal. And then they were there, they were trained, and most of them became president, like Houphouët-Boigny and some other people, very important figures of the politics within the African continent, but really, really connected to the French colonial empire. And those people were trained there and then evolving in the administration of our different countries, and at some point emerging as key figures into the political movements, and some of them became president. And what was interesting for Hamedine and Stéphane was that the École William-Ponty was in Sébikotane, but École William-Ponty in Sébikotane was not the only school. At some point, you have President Abdoulaye Wade. He's the president that we have during the years 2000. Abdoulaye Wade decided to create like Senghor. He did a lot of things like Senghor, but yes, a lot of things like Senghor, not as well as him, but he did things. And then he created this school called l'Université des Futurs Africains. So the University for the African Future. And the idea for this university was to gather the whole intelligentsia of the continent, the key person that will be the future leader of our countries. So he go to Sébikotane. He didn't re-exploited the building of the school William-Ponty, who is still there with the archive and everything. He decided to create his own building, invest billions of CFA in this project. It was financed by Morocco, but also other cooperation founders. And then the school never happened. So it is a whole land where the people of Sébikotane, which is a field of agriculture, the people can't use the agriculture, they can't do it, but they build their school telling them that, okay, all your kids gonna go into that school because you are a key person in this geography and you're gonna have you will give birth to amazing African leaders. The school never happened. And at that moment, there was a whole conversation on how we can develop or how in our cities and our countries, it was really important for everyone to have a degree and an education so that you can fulfill your dream, so that you can become someone. And there is a whole field, education, agriculture, like different kind of field or component of our society, but also of the way we navigate our societies that were dropped by the road or by a side in order to be into that university degree system. And then land where people used to harvest and to do agriculture were just forgotten and were not used anymore for that. So when Abdoulaye Wade come with this university dream, people are just like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Finally, it is happening. William-Ponty closed. We were disappointed, but now we have this and that, and it's going to be amazing. It never happened. And then the actual president of Senegal, Macky Sall, decided to just destroy the building that was already ready. We just need the corpus to get into that building. And the president, so these are image of the exhibition in the space. And then this is a maquette of the building made by Abdoulaye Wade in the late 2008, and at some point this university or this school never happened, and then the actual president decided that he gonna just remove the whole building, so the infrastructure was ready just like that, no doors, no glasses, but ready. And then he decided to just destroy this and to build a new building that's going to cost billions of CFA that won't be used by his predecessor, because it is always like that. And people of Sébikotane keep on waiting for them to develop something that's going to meet their need or their kids' future. And the work that Hamedine and Stéphane are doing with the School of Mutants, they are not alone. There is many people that join at some point the collective, Oulimata Gay, Valérie Oussouf, etc. The work they've been doing was digging and looking at in Ghana with AfriCile, in Senegal with Université des Mutants, in Europe and other geographies, which kind of pedagogies were synced or developed or taught in order to give other perspective and new thinking that are informing the global part of our world. The fact that we share this land and we just can't be each of us in specific areas and thinking that we have the good way to do. We have to inform and to be informed globally and to be interconnected in order to preserve this soil and to preserve this earth all together. And the work they've been doing with Université des Mutants and digging into the archive, reinvesting the research, reinvesting the corpus of Université des Mutants, printing it on, fabrics. We print on fabrics the books of the Université des Mutants. There was a magazine, and for the whole duration of the Université des Mutants, the magazine was published. And you have very, very few copies. So they come with that, with many, many, many info and many, many books. And we were just like completely crazy here at Row, because it was resources that we never see. We hear about it, but we didn't see those resources. And then we have some of them in the library, but those resources completely inform the exhibition set of l'École des Mutants. And we work and we dig into Mudra Afrique, which was the dance company developed by Germaine Acogny with Maurice Béjart, and which is still existing into what we call now l'École des Sables. We inform the work that was made by the people from School of Mutants, but also the curricula, the corpus of book of Octavia Butler. We dig into the work of Sheikh Anta. We dig into people that develop or think all the ways to navigate our communities. And also he informed also the work of Edouard Glissant, and Patrick Chamoiseau was recorded talking about les Batuto, which is whom is a community of people, a fictional community of people that have an intuitive way to navigate their relationship, how they are together and how they are like how they are outside publicly. And so the Batuto somehow can be a kind of aspiration for human beings to be, like how we can develop the kind of intuitive way to navigate people emotion, feelings, relationship, how we can interact, and feeling that people are, oh, he's at this stage, okay, I should step back because of this and that and this and that. And it is somehow for Hamedine and Stéphane, all those pedagogies and the assemblies, the mutant assembly, it is a way to rethink the way we do exhibition, we gather, we publish, we write, and how we can rethink. Even in the publication, we did a correspondence and we discussed many, many things through this correspondence, and it's ended up being thousands of signs, but thousands and thousands of signs, and it's almost 10 pages of correspondence, which is not really, how to say, accurate for some people, but this is the way we decided to engage with their practice. And what was challenging with this exhibition was the fact that you have various resources that are accessible, various conversations that you want to inform, but you can't do it. You can't inform them all. So the idea was to find ways for them to exist within the space and being read or seen or hear using the different medium that we have access to. And the other part, the other component that you can see in this image specifically is gris-gris that are tied into the fabrics, that are woven into the fabrics. And the gris-gris, you have the mutant lamp that you have in the middle of the exhibition space. And the gris-gris, in the fabrics, you have caption of books. You have printings of page of magazines, books, or the first cover of one one CD or one book. And these are the knowledge that the School of Mutants is digging into, learning about, and trying to collect and to gather in order to have them and to bring them in a space where people can look at it or dive into it. And they put the grigi on that because here in Senegal, but in many, many other countries around us, we used to have talisman or gris-gris that we wear, not only in the African continent. I mean, everyone have a talisman, but here we have those gris-gris that our marabout or the people that have the ancient knowledge will tell you to wear, and you're gonna wear it. You're gonna wear it, and you are gonna protect your envelope from accident, from I don't know, from people trying to kill you, from being a bad person. You're going to put different kind of talisman to protect you for something, but what you are really protecting is your envelope, because what is in a certain way, or in our opinion, the resource and what is important to be protected is our identities and our knowledge, and this is not protected. What is protected is the conversation we have through the canon of WhatsApp, TikTok, and etc., etc. It doesn't mean that it is not interesting. It just means that what is really important for our people to have, or to know, or to be given, or to be gifted with, and how we can all sign a kind of social contract in order to foster this knowledge about what is happening in the world, of course, but mostly of our identities. What made us this? What made us thinking that cacao is our thing, or banana is West Indian people from Caribbean thing? And when we know that finally the transformation of the land during the colonial empire transformed the way people were eating, and finally there was many other pieces than just ananas, cacao, banana, and arachide or peanuts, you know? So which are the things that make us knowing that, okay, this is us, this is me as a Lebu, this is me as a Serer, this is me as a Senegalese, but what does it mean within the global context? And yes, so we try to do that in many different ways. You have seen the picture, what is happening in the garden, and all the words, the caption, the text were just disseminated all around the spaces, in the courtyard, at the entrance, and in a form of a maquette, but also a radio at the entrance of the space. And it was just going with different kind of sounds, conversation, Patrick Chamazo talking about the batuto, people singing. So it was really, really interesting. And the assembly took place later. The assembly took place in July because of different kind of things. Assembly was also an amazing moment of gathering of people from the collective de l'Assemblée des Mutants, but also people who had the practice that inform this research of knowledge and specifically rooted knowledge. Mm. And the last exhibition I want to talk about, I'm really sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but I'm gonna just go through Tuan Andrew Nguyen exhibition if I have, or it is possible. It is the last exhibition we hosted. No, not the last. It was the one that we hosted during the Dakar Biennale. We just finished we are just with an exhibition called Sunyugent around climate justice. But what was really interesting with Tuan exhibition is that the residency process through which Tuan come to Ro was a research residency process, an international residency program. Tuan Andrew Nguyen is an artist that is from Vietnam, but was raised in the United States. And at some point, he finds the need to go back to his hometown in order to learn about his own history, because when he left, he has only two, and he left because he was about people. It was the Vietnamese, the guerre du Vietnam with the United States, and its family have to just left this crowd of war, this space. And then they go to the United States through Myanmar, and they did the migration route that people do in our geographies, and then they arrived to the United States. he grew up there, and at some point he needed to go back to Vietnam. And then he learned more about his family story, about the Vietnamese war, but also about the Indochina war that happened with the French. And when he was doing his research, Tuan was interested in the fraternity relationship that was built between the Senegalese riflemen that were called Senegalese because the first effective of riflemen were from Senegal, Saint-Louis specifically. It was created by FEDERB, and it was a composition of people that were prisoners, of people that were subject of the empire because we were during the colonial era, and of people that were from Benin, from Togo, Ivory Coast, all the countries of the colonial empire. So AEF, AOF, and all the component of the French colonial empire. So those who were subject of the empire were called Senegalese riflemen, with some exception that have other names. For instance, for people from Maghreb, there is a specific name they are using, and they were used as a kind of body of war. Somehow they were used to go and to fight for the regime, to fight for the empire, and with a compensation for some of them, most of them normally, but it never ended up the way we wanted to happen. And at least those people, the ones who decided, we say that some of them just joined, they were happy to join, but it was an income in a country where you are submitted. And then you have what we call the French Senegalese officers that were from Senegal, or from Maghreb, or from the French officers that are from the very country which is colonized, but in commune or area of the country that were French. So in Dakar, those communes that were French, it was Gorée, Dakar, Rufisque, et Saint-Louis. So the Senegalese that go to fight for France during that period and that were from these areas were French people, like nationality French. And so we call them that the French Senegalese soldier or officers, because they have the possibility to evolve. They are still less paid than French, they are French and recognized as such. So all those components of the French army at some point used to go to fight for France in different kind of war operation theater. So you have, of course, World War I. You have the uprising in some geographical areas in, on some geographical areas in the continent, like they stopped the uprising in Madagascar, they stopped it in Algiers, they stopped it in different kind of areas. They were the fer de lance, we say in French, so the armed arm of the French colonial empire. And at some point, this group of people has been sent to, so they fight for the World War II, and they also different kind of, but at some point they go to Indochina. And in Indochina, the problem was that there was component or part of Vietnam that want their independence, like it happened in every different kind of area of the French colonial empire. And people want to take back their independence, but this happened at very, at almost same times or time lapse in the French colonial empire. And in Vietnam, things or struggles started in 47, 40, I have to say 40, perhaps even before that, because in 42, you have soldiers that were sent there. And then from this area to 43, the moment where the French lose Indochina, you have Senegalese riflemen and Senegalese French officers that were sent to Vietnam in Indochina. We have to say Indochina for this specific period of time. And they were there to fight for the goods of the French colonial empire. But when they go there, first thing that happened is that most of them connected, even if they were in oppositional camp or even if they were fighting all together for the empire, they find connection, and there was a kind of relation of fraternity that was built, of brotherhood that was built among the Senegalese riflemen. And at some point also, some of them taken prisoners by the Vietnamese, or some Vietnamese taken prisoners by them, they develop a relationship because also they feel that they were the fight was not for the same reason, and they were not fighting for themselves, but they were fighting for the good of an oppressor, and they have a common oppressor. So Tuan, when he come to Senegal, he come to dig into that story. He come to learn about the Senegalese refoulements and the kind of relationship that they have built together, to take conversation, to have interviews, etc., etc. And then he come to Rome, and then we start making the research with him. We start going to the refoulements house, the doyen, in order to learn about them, etc., etc. And then within that context, we find out that it is not that we find out because most of the people know it. Perhaps us as a younger generation, we didn't identify it, but people were aware. It is just that we don't talk about those things. And it's very strange to say it like that, but it is true. And then Tuan, when he come to Dakar, we start the research, we find out that there was a Senegalese Vietnamese community within Dakar. And the Senegalese Vietnamese community come to Senegal through the Indochina War. When the French lose the war, they have to drag and to put back in the boat the people who belongs to their empire, but belongs to their country. So the French Senegalese officer and the Vietnamese officer, the French officers, but they have also to drag all the refugees they have sent in that land and to protect them and to put them back to where they have been taken from. And when this happened, what happened also is that during the Indochina War, Senegalese refoulement have relationship with Vietnamese women, and some of them get married, they have children, some others were just in a relationship, so no official paper, but they have children. Most of the children were recognized, and they were métis, and the war ended and they lose the war. They put back in the boat their soldiers, they put back in the boat the kids and the wives, but those who were not wives and only concubine at some point, they just put them in the boat and they didn't, they didn't protect them, they leave them there. So those women were considered as, betrayal to their country, betrayals to the Vietnamese that were fighting for Indochina to not be French anymore. And the ones who were sent abroad, so from Vietnam to France, some of them stay there, from Vietnam to Burkina, from Vietnam to Senegal, from Vietnam to Mali, from Vietnam to, through, of course, Marseille, because you have always this stop at Marseille. They come in countries where people were not expecting them, and they come in countries where sometimes those Senegalese soldiers or riflemen have wives, because they are Muslim, they are in polygamic relationship, and they have the right to have many wives. What is happening is that the question of do we go or don't we go was not possible, because most of the women that were there would have been killed or face many injuries if they have stayed there. So the idea for the soldier was, okay, either you don't come, either you don't come, but the kids are going. You like it, you didn't like it, you can't stay there because they're gonna, I don't know what will happen to my kids, so you can't stay. For those who go back to Senegal and were in, monogamic marriage, it was somehow okay, even if there was many struggles in terms of acculturation. But those who go back in polygamic families where the people are living together in this very own concession, it was terrific because people were not expecting them, and there was a position that the family has taken in terms of, you didn't belong to us and we didn't choose you. And most of the ones who were married to French Senegalese officers were in what we call the coastal area where the Lebu community is. Yes, my fellow Lebu people. And then in those areas, when the wives come with their 7, 6, 4, 5 children, the families were just, okay, we thought you were dead, and now you are not dead, you are back, happy, but you are coming with a wife, and you are coming with a wife that have already 7 children, and you have a wife here that we have chosen that have only 2 children, or that thought that you were not here anymore. So there is a whole negotiation that happened into the communities and into the families. And I have to say that among the exhibition that we have hosted here at Row, one of the really challenging one was Tuan's exhibition. Because when Tuan's come and we find out about the history, each of the team members were looking at the people they have been growing with, and that were called Chinu or Chinese or la 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 something, and that grew up with them that were not Chinese but Vietnamese, and that were mixed, and young people that grow up in a very, how do you say, challenging and oppressive ecosystem, because they were not expected or liked or accepted by the people of the community. So Tuan started digging into that story with the team member of Row. We go to different family. We find out that Tata Claire, that was doing spring rolls for years, and we all go there to buy spring rolls, is from this community, of course, and we are using and eating spring rolls because of a specific reason. And then we ended up like understanding our own history and understanding that we grew up in countries and in an educational system that learned us a lot about the colonial empire and what happened within the world, but they didn't say, when they say about the Indochina war, that we have people from Indochina here, that people from Vietnamese descent are part of us, and we are the same community of people. And this was challenging because we all grew up with people that we bullied regarding this very aspect of their identity. Some of those kids grew up in families where you have the mother still speaking Vietnamese and maintaining the Vietnamese culture, but some of them didn't grow up with their mother, so they are completely acculturated, speaking the local language. It could be Lebu, it could be Peul, it could be whatever it is, depending of the geographical area where they've been sent, and have not a clue about their very history, like where are they from and in which history are they rooted. And this exhibition was a moment for us to create a kind of conversation Senegalese Vietnamese community. Tuan decided to make a film focused on 3 specific histories that can inform somehow different aspects of the Vietnamese Senegalese community history. So he invited to take part of the film most of the people from the Vietnamese community. They did a casting among them. So the history and the film of Tuan is played by people from the Senegalese Vietnamese community. And the 3 stories are the stories of Mako Dunjai, who is a lawyer that not for a very long time, until he's 18, didn't know that his mother was not his mother, and that his brother was his, and that his elder brother and him were from 2 Vietnamese women that their father met in Vietnam, in Indochina at that time, and that were not married to the father, so they were not bring back. So they have been them chipped, I have to say, but their mother weren't there, and they have no relationship with them because the father didn't say it. And they discovered themselves and discovered that they have a specific link among the whole brotherhood in that family, because both of them were coming from Vietnam. Of course, you see that you are different, but when it is not mentioned, and when in the family there is no conversation, you can't start the conversation because the hierarchy is too pronounced. So when they did something like that, and when these kind of things happen, Makodu will tell you, I don't have a story to tell. I have a non-story to tell. I don't know the story. I discover it. I didn't grow up with my mother, so I don't know my Vietnamese component. At some point now, he knows a lot about it, but he was struggling to be part of the film because of his non-knowledge of this history. And then the family that comes to join was Anne-Marie Nyan's family, and she grew up in Fanok, an area of Dakar, where you have a lot of people from the Lebu community, but Nyan is not Lebu. And Anne-Marie grew up there and wrote a book on her father, on her mother, and the history of her mother coming to Senegal. And the third family was the family of Mary Bay. I'm sorry back, because Mary Bay, perhaps I have the picture. So here is the portrait of Senegalese, how do you say, soldier with officers, like the Mary Bay great-grandfather is in the middle of the picture with this black jacket and taking one of his fellow, how do you say, brother-in-arm on the shoulder. And this is Ibrahima Thiam Bey, and he is the founder of the Bey family here in Senegal, in Bop. And Mary Bay and her father and her great-grandfather and her great-grandmother fell in love. In fact, she saved him 2 times, because she saved him from the Viet army, and then she saved him because he was in a very, very bad disposition, and she healed him until he was able to walk again, and then they left together. He married her and they left together. And what is interesting regarding Mary Bay family is that they know the whole history, but it is a love story. Even if they meet a lot of ego when they come to Dakar and the family don't want them to be, finally her great-grandmother became the chief when her great-grandfather passed away of this very family, because she found a way to be accepted. But what is really, really, how do you say, representative also of this community is that there is a lot of resilience within the community of Senegalese refugees and the community of Vietnamese, Senegalese people here in Dakar. And most of them acculturate, all of them at some point acculturate, but there was also very challenging moment for them to be in that society, because no matter how long you've been to Senegal, how perfectly you're going to speak Wolof, there is also this impossibility or lack of ignorance for people who can't make the difference between them and the new, for instance, migration of workers from Asia. It could be China, it could be Korea. We have a new vague of migration. So they always need to be able to share or to voice the fact that they belong to here. They are not strangers and they know the language. They were not just here because of economical reason. They are here because it is history and they belong to that history, and we belong to that history together. So these are views of the exhibitions, and the exhibition was set like a 4-screen video installation, and this is very important. I don't know why I didn't mention it from the very beginning. When Tuan articulate the film, so the people, Makodo, Anne-Marie, and Mary write the script, and then he developed a 4-screen video installation so that people are surrounded by the image. But people, when they are in the middle of the room, they either choose to look at 2 or 1 or 3 or hold the screen 360 degrees, or they can be at an angle and have a wide scope, but not a perfect scope of the 2 screens on the right and on the left. But the idea for him was for people to be immersed into that story, and also to articulate his artwork as the memory of this very community. Like, you don't have a wide overview of what did happen. You have some part of the story, some part you know very well, some part you know a bit, some part you don't know at all, etc., etc. So the building of the infrastructure of the exhibition was to develop this kind of room where we have a dark room where we can have the 4-screen and the story is shared there, and then we have the spaces where the photography and the archive of the community are displayed and shown, and these are images from the opening. And now this exhibition is traveling, and it was an amazing moment of gathering with this community, because when they come, they help us through the whole process, collecting the picture, going to find this family and this other family in order to learn more about what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. And it was really interesting to see how they were moved, of course, touched by the dynamic of the work, Tuan's coming to them being Vietnamese itself and going to tell their own story, though feeling reconnected to the community, but also giving space for very old people who never get a chance to talk about that and to voice yes, what happened, and to voice also how difficult and challenging it was for them. It was really, really appreciated, and we learned a lot about this community, and we worked together. We're working on a publication. So there was a publication for this exhibition, but we are working on a wider publication that will inform also the life of the communities that were in Burkina, in different kind of other geographical area, and that can tie also with what we call the children of the empire, and what does it mean to be children from the empire, and how this history is informing also things that happen within the different colonial structure of empires around the world, and which kind of métissage this bring, and which kind of untold story behind the war happened at this place at this time. This war happened at this place at this time with the French and the Germans, at this place at this time with the French and the, I don't know, the UK, etc., etc. You don't have the inner thing, you know, the conversation that will tell you about what happened to people, to the very people of that history, and which kind of life they have now, if they have one, because this is also, most of us, we don't know what happened to the people that stayed there. Some other we know how they passed away, some other we don't know, some other we found, some other we don't found, some come, some never come, some go back, some never go back. So it's, yes, it's never finished. And Tuan is standing here with a cab, with Maritiva that help us navigating the Vietnamese Senegalese community and discussing with them about the project and sharing and asking for pictures and asking for yes, conversation and wanting to know the story. And they really welcomed us, and they were really, how do you say, a bit like don't really knowing what we want to do and what we need from them, but at a certain point when they give us the trust, they really opened the door, and it was amazing for us. So we didn't show all the pictures for the show, of course, because there was too many pictures. We show some of them. Now the exhibition with the video of Tuan and some pictures are traveling. So it's gonna, yes, it's really important for us to voice this history and to be able also to maintain and to preserve this relationship with the Sen Viet community. And the artist we are receiving as a resident next February is called Ghassan Salhab, and he's from Liban, and we are starting a research on how the Lebanese community and the Syrian community in Senegal and in West Africa, when they come, how they come, what happened to some of them, from which kind of migration line they were. Did they stay in Senegal, or some go to France, some to Canada? What is the history of the Beiruti, and how they evolve in that work? Normally you have this never-ending war. So for one point, I have to say that Tuan's exhibition that took 4 years to develop through the film, the COVID, and finally the Dakar Biennale, it was really interesting. Yes, really interesting to understand that this is what we want to do. You know, we are at another moment of raw history. It doesn't mean that we never done this kind of work, but it is also how you reconnect your people, you know, how you understand the presence of this person and this component of the society in the homeland, and how you can be all in this together, and really all in this together.
Fatima, I should thank you.
Too long, I'm sorry, Stephen.
Since it's so late, I'd like to just open things to questions, and I think you ended at a kind of perfect moment to talk about that relationship that you indicated way at the beginning of the talk about the phrase that you used, or was part of the printed matter, translocal parallelism, and that idea that just as you've described about the Vietnamese and Senegalese societies, and now the Lebanese, this idea of raw's relationship to local community, but also to some sense of how are we different from the West, but what do we share with the West?
Yes.
And not only the West, of course, Vietnam,
Yes.
etc. That seems very interesting. And I'm wondering if people have questions related to that kind of situatedness, curatorial situatedness of raw, or other questions that you have. We have just a few minutes at this point. So if you'd like, just turn off your mute and ask any questions you'd like.
I have a question. Good morning, everyone. So the question is a question of sort of, and this may have been discussed because I came in a little later, is the idea of integration, like acculturation. To what degree do these communities really adapt, or there's sort of like a syncretic kind of cultural acculturation that's happening where they're very much embedded in the Senegalese community? Because I know in places in the Caribbean, even though folks intermarry with locals and so forth, they still can remain insular. And so I'm curious to know to what degree these communities have integrated, and how in modern times has it become more insular, whereas in the past people didn't have an option but to really sort of integrate into the cultural landscape that they find themselves.
So perhaps I didn't say it correctly. When the Vietnamese community come to Senegal, so they were rooted in a very, how do you say, they arrived in a geography where people were not expecting them. So this is how things, happen. Either they acculturate totally within the geography where they landed because they are the only or two Vietnamese women with their kids in this specific ages or in this specific land. So they ended up, because they don't have option to go back, completely integrating their family history, completely integrating the husband, style of living, behaves, the language, the outfit, the cooking, all of it. In some areas like Fatigue or Sali or Mbour, or there is geographical area of Senegal where sometimes there were the only one in the villages. So always being a subject of laughing or curiosity somehow, and the kids feel the same. But the kids, as they come usually at a very, very early ages, when they come, they totally acculturate, but feel so, this kind of, you don't really know if you should take your mother position or if you should take the community you belongs to position. So you are in the middle of something, and things really change when in 2002, if I remember correctly, they decided to create the very association of the Saint Viet communities. They call it Kim Hoi, and this association was created by Maritiva. I have to say that Maritiva, not only her, but Maritiva, Aminjai, and other women descendant of the Vietnamese Senegalese, the first Vietnamese Senegalese community. I have to say second generation, that the kids, that some of them were born in Vietnam, so most were born here, but they are the mother and the father that came, and then some of them really know each other because they grew up in the same homeland, town, same villages.
I think you briefly mentioned this towards the beginning of your talk, in terms of the programming including folks from the diaspora, and I was wondering, because you're working so locally, if there are any kind of curatorial decisions or programmatic decisions that are made to not only, provide context for those working in diaspora within the local, but if there are any other kind of considerations that you take to translate or to provide additional context for those diasporic experiences that could be different than within Dakar and within Senegal.
Yes, of course. There is one thing that is happening here in Dakar in particular, is that there is many different components or many different groups, cultural groups that live into the city in Dakar, but that live in Senegal. So the mixed, I don't have to say that in English. So there is a various range of people that are coming from all over the world that live here and that road path the work that we are doing here at Row. So of course our work is rooted because this is how we started, but what we are doing and through the different projects we are doing, sometimes the connection can be made only because there is this specific curators that is part of our network, that it is not part of the diaspora, but that is tying together a different person or different thematic that inform our context. This remains important. It doesn't mean that we won't host any kind of artist because of like cultural or appartenance or no, but it means that it is really a space that have been taught to give the priority to this knowledge, curricula, and pedagogy so that they exist somewhere. Now, things have changed. Many of art centers, institution galleries are doing this kind of work. So we are rethinking also the work we've been doing or the research we are doing and how we are doing it, because even our very context has changed. There is a lot of collective of artists that create their own art space. You have, of course, commercial galleries always, and then you have libraries or Terme Sud or Célébéon or those infrastructure or OH Gallery that are here and doing the same kind of work, but not as rooted. So we give space for this interconnection among us to exist and space for many kind of people or many kind of research to come and to emerge through Row. And the Vox Artist is a space where even if your work is not interconnected, totally interconnected to the very context of Senegal, if it is informing one of another practice from the diaspora, then you are more than welcome to share. Or if your research is connected to, I don't know, the architectural work of Chenou, which is from Swiss in Dakar during Senghor era, you have a point of connection. But there is a need to have a connection because people need also to see themselves into what we are talking about or to understand what kind of connection is there. But now what is happening also, and I'm gonna finish, I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but I'm gonna finish here. What is really happening, is a lot since COVID is that young curators, artists, researchers from the diaspora are coming back to Senegal to live here. And then they bring with them friends, artists, collective that are not informing all the questions we are informing, but we are really interested in their very practice and why this practice needs now to be rooted into Senegal. Not judging, we are really interested in opening also the conversation and opening it widely.
Is there one last question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the publishing arm of RAW and like what that means to you curatorially to have like the library space and the publishing part of the institution.
So the publishing starts from the very beginning at RAW. And one of the first reasons for which we have a publication was when Koyo come and she bring all her books in the library, she was coming from a specific curriculum. So she was rooted into Swiss Germanophone curriculum, addressing the curatorial practice, informing the contemporary African art practice of many artists, but still she was aware that there was lack of resources that can address different kind of other corpus or curriculum. So what did happen is that we did in Bibliothèque Idéale, which is Ro's first publication. It was a little green book where she sent an email to most of her fellow curator friends and people from her network and friends, families, and also workers that were in the field she was digging into and that were addressing the question of the curatorial practice, but also of art history within our very context. And then people answer, some of them send books, but some other just answer, and it gives birth to that publication that we send broadly. We offer most of them. We are very bad sellers of book. We offer most of the books, but still the idea was for us to spread this voice, and the corpus was made into French and English so that it can be sent everywhere. And so that within the continent, you always have this dichotomy with the people, between the people that are English-speaking Africa, Lusophone Africa, French-speaking Africa. And the idea for us to make it English and French, we know that from each geography, at least you're going to have one or the other language. So we just send it like that. And it also gives a space to welcome international artists. And it was really important from the very beginning to Koyo, because, and perhaps this is the real question you were asking, Sophia, because the thing was, we have local artists that we want to professionalize, or we want to help, or we want to work with them, or to foster their practice, and to, yes, organize things so that they can see themselves in what they are doing. But we also know that there is connection between the reflection of Jan Sestuti doing woven, for instance. She's from Italy, but she's also living and working in France, and she's doing numeric woven, like she's weaving codes. And the connection between Jan and Edimar from the community of weavers here is weaving. It is not their ethnicity. It is just weaving. It is not their cultural appartenance. It is the fact that we share this kind of practice. We share some fabrics. We share artisan, handcraft. We work the wood. We work the stones, etc., etc. So this connection can be made. And then the publication was a space for that to happen. And other publications that we have done, like the one from the symposium, the one we do for the symposium, is informing in terms of contain the practice we are going. Most of the time we have the books next to us and like sharing, we have contribution that we do. And then sometimes we just need this book because yes, the work of Chimurenga, I have to read this code that Tone has said last time in this academy or last time in the symposium. Sometimes it's this Dominique Malaké that share a quote and share her thought, and we feel ourselves in what she said, and we need it to inform what we are doing with l'École des Mutants, for instance. And many of the resources why the local residency program is also working is that the public programming and the residency and the exhibition and the symposium are all interconnected. And most of the people that are in those books and publication, even if we are invited to be part of publication or this kind of publication, it is always someone who comes somehow for any reason, visiting the space, doing an exhibition, writing an article on Dakar art scene, that gonna make a connection between what we do here at Ro and what is happening abroad. So we have a wide range of resources finally that we can go into, dig into, invest and harvest it, and à chaque fois bringing something different from these very resources. And we don't even dig really into the public programming, because if we do so, I really think that somehow we will be able also to drag. Ro have been working since 11 years. So many things happen within those 11 years. It can be not a lot, not for many people, but for us, it is a lot. And many things happen within the space because friends of Koyo come, friends of Marie-Hélène come, this fellow from the academy doing a curatorial practice did do Cura. They have a research that was not connected to Africa, but it was a research that was informing in a very specific way the curatorial practice. So we decided to bring them because it can inform at some points or for the future another practice that is happening here. So the books are the nurture we have, and it is sometimes to document what has been done, but most of the time is to being able to have this very physical copy that we can send abroad or give to people that we want to give so that they can also spread the word. And we are a lot like bring your crew. When you do something, you bring your people, and then it gives more space for them to share what they have been doing, how they've been doing it, and the reason why it is significant in our very context.
Great. Okay, we should end. Fatima, thank you so much.
Thank you.